issues. Also, a little later in the show, we're going to hear from Democratic gubernatorial candidate Vincent Shaheen. Carolina This Week starts right now.
This is Carolina This Week. Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Vincent Shaheen, Democratic candidate for governor, is going to be with us in a little while. But first up this morning, Congressman Tom Rice, who's going to be heading back to Washington before too terribly long. Congressman Rice, thank you, as always, for coming in to talk with us this morning.
Good morning, Tim. It's always an honor to be here.
Thank you. ISIS, I think, is what everybody's talking about this week. The president addressed the country Wednesday night, outlined his plan for action, may go to Congress for approval. What do you think? What do you think about the plan he laid out? How do you think you'd vote if he came to you?
I don't think anybody would argue that that we have a bunch of radical terrorists who have stated very openly that they want to do America harm, and that situation has to be dealt with. And it's mushrooming out of control. We need to deal with it as soon and efficiently as we can. But it has to be carefully thought out. What we can't do is have America against Islam. That's not what this is. That's how they like to frame it. And we need to have a broad coalition. You know, we hear all the time that Islam is not a violent religion. What we need is for the practitioners of true Islam to participate in this coalition. We need the Muslim world involved to say, hey, this is not representative of us, and we're going to do our part to stop it. And in fact, that's obviously true. 90% of the people who've been killed by these terrorists, these thugs, are Muslims.
Some of these countries seem like they want to help out. I mean, we've even heard from Iran that they want to see ISIS decimated. Saudi Arabia says, oh, we're willing to support you, but everybody's willing to go so far. It doesn't seem like they want to actually contribute either, troops on the ground, so to speak, if it came down to it.
I think they need to have troops on the ground. I mean,
you think America needs to have troops on the ground?
I would do my best to avoid America having troops on the ground, or certainly as few as we possibly can. The president's already committed to put, over 1,000 troops over there for training the Syrian rebels. Mm-hmm. But you have to think carefully about this, because a year ago, the president said that it was an urgent thing. The Assad regime had crossed the red line, and that the United States needed to take military action, and that he felt like he needed congressional authorization for that, because he'd gotten a big public backlash when he said it. And the public didn't want to be involved in attacking the Assad regime. He said we needed to attack the Assad regime and help the rebels that are fighting the Assad regime. Now, here we sit a year later, and we're going to attack the rebels that we were going to help a year ago. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, this is a different group of rebels. I think that's partially true. But we need to be very careful about, the way we proceed with this. Again, this does not need to be America against Islam. That is not what this is about. This is a specific group of terrorist thugs who have stated that they want to do America harm. They've shown it very graphically that they'd like to do America harm.
The other big issue, in fact, our sister station, WWMB CW21, had a town hall meeting this past Monday night on immigration. You probably thought you might be heading back to Washington the next week or so, and you'd be tackling immigration, but it appears that's not going to be happening.
No, interesting way this has all developed, Tim. 2 months ago, we had tens of thousands of migrant children showing up on the southern border, and in my opinion, that is a direct result of the president's adoption of the DACA, the deferred deportation provisions for people who came here as young children. He said we weren't going to deport them, and all of a sudden we have children showing up on our borders. Entirely foreseeable. Tens of thousands as a direct result of the president's unilateral action. Congress had considered that provision and decided not to pass it. The president said, I'm going to do it unilaterally. He had no authority to do that. tens of thousands of people show up. He said he needed $3.7 billion to deal with that humanitarian crisis. The Senate refused to take that up. He said it was urgent, have to have $3.7 billion. The House took up an immigration bill for $600 million we offered to the President to deal with it, to provide for expedited hearings, additional judges to carry out those expedited hearings, transportation to get these children back to their countries and back to their families and safely home, and additional border protection and National Guard. We would pay for the National Guard if the border states wanted to call them up. The President and the Senate both scoffed at that. Now here we sit 2 months later, and the President said a couple of days ago, well, it's really not quite the issue that it was. So the urgent need, the $3.7 billion that was needed urgently 2 months ago, suddenly apparently is not required, and the problem's been handled. I don't know, it's a unusual circumstance.
What about people who would say, we need to take in these children, we can't send them back to a dangerous country?
Well, you know, I don't know that these countries are any more dangerous than they were 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, and this is a conversation we need to have nationally. My belief is almost every country in the world, almost every organized country, a member of the OECD, bases the bulk of their immigration on skill set. You know, what they're trying to do is make themselves more competitive. And so if you have a skill that the country needs that makes them more competitive, then you have a good chance of immigration. We allow 1.2 million legal immigrants per year. 2/3 of those are based on family relationships. So what we end up doing is bringing in a lot of people who rely on an already overburdened social safety net. Now what we need to do is you know, I believe in immigration reform, but not the type of immigration reform that the Senate passed, not the type of immigration reform that the President is pushing. I believe that we need to have an immigration system that values skill set, that makes this country more competitive, that will build our economy and bring jobs. I think it should be based on skill set. I think we need to have additional border protection. I think we need to have universal E-Verify so that employers don't employ illegal immigrants. That's the carrot that brings people over, okay? And it needs to have teeth. We need to really enforce it. And then finally, we need to have a good system for temporary visas, because there are some areas of work that people can't find enough Americans to do. And so we need to relieve that pressure. We need to have a good method of bringing temporary workers over and making sure that they go home and don't overstay their visas.
We need to get to a commercial in a second, but just one point I'd like to, I wonder how congressmen think about this. It could be a good thing for you all if the President doesn't tackle immigration until after the election, because if the Senate goes to the Republicans, that could help the Republican immigration agenda move forward.
Well, you know, I think the President and the Democrats thought they had the tailwinds with them on immigration reform with the public until these children started showing up on the border. And I think the public realized what a massive problem this was, and they got a big blowback. The President said early on, well, if Congress doesn't act, I'm going to make 5 million more people legal. He has absolutely no right to do that. But he said, I'm going to make 5 million more people legal. And then he started getting blowback from the public. He realized it might affect the Senate elections. He said, whoa, 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 wait a minute. We won't do it until after the election. That is a purely political decision. He doesn't have the right to do it anyway. If he did proceed to try to make 5 million more people legal, I think that the Republicans wouldn't take 6 more seats in the Senate. I think they'd take a whole lot more than that. So it'll be interesting to see how the elections turn out in November. It could change the future of this country.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we won't have much time, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what you plan to do next session for us here on the Grand Strand.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Carolina This Week. My guest this morning, Congressman Tom Rice. I want to point out real quick, this is an election year. You're running against Democrat Gloria Bermelt-Tanubu again. She's been on this show recently. I've invited her to come back before the election. I'm inviting you to come back before the election to talk about your candidacy. Now, what are you going to do for the Grand Strand when you head back to Washington?
Well, you know, I've been working on infrastructure. We have made our pitch now to the, we passed the ports bill, which allowed the Port of Georgetown access to harbor maintenance trust funds. I've made my pitch to the Army Corps of Engineers, and the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Bill Schuster, came in and made the pitch with me. They told me they'd notify me within 30 to 60 days, so I'm expecting an answer from them here pretty quickly. I'm hoping it'll be positive. We continue to make progress on the permit for I-73. We've been held up a little bit on wetlands mitigation. We're trying to identify a good replacement track. We're getting close on that, so hopefully in the next couple of months we'll have some good news on the permit for I-73.
You know, I think with ISIS, with immigration, even Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, a lot of the conversation has been shifted away from the economy. How about the economy? How about getting the economic engine really going again? Things have been moving forward a bit, but not at the pace I think anybody would like.
Tim, you know, 6 years after the Great Recession, the economy remains stagnant, unemployment far too high. Millions and millions of people have left the workforce and given up trying. It is getting a little better, but it's doing so far too slowly. Everything I do in Congress, I look at through the glasses of jobs in the economy. That's what I ran on. That's what I work on. American competitiveness. I truly believe, you've heard me say this before, all this country has to do is to approach things like the state of South Carolina does against other states, like Horry County does and Florence County does and other counties do in competing with other counties. If this country would say, we want to be competitive, no one could stop us. The problem that the state of South Carolina has, the problem that the 7th District, this congressional district, the problem that Horry County, Florence County, Marion County, all these counties have to deal with is that they're competing for a declining pool of jobs. You know, when you hear things like AstraZeneca going to England, when you hear things like Burger King going to Canada, why are they doing that? Because our country's laws are not competitive. You know, when the president says something like, well, they should pay higher taxes to be patriotic, that's utter nonsense. You know, these countries, what people don't realize, companies, they have to compete worldwide. And if AstraZeneca is competing, paying 40% in taxes against a company who's paying 15% in taxes in Ireland, in the long run, AstraZeneca simply will not be able to compete.
And I have to say that this is something I've heard Republicans and Democrats bring up. Cut the corporate tax. We only have 30 seconds here. Cut the corporate tax, cut the corporate tax. Both sides seem to be on board, but it never gets done.
Dave Kemp, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Republican, has put forth a tax reform proposal. I suspect if you see the Republicans win the Senate, that will be acted on promptly next spring.
Congressman Tom Rice, thanks for being in here. Hope to see you back here in about a month or so to talk about your re-election. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, my friend, and thank you for allowing me to represent you. It is such a huge honor to be your representative in Washington.
We'll be right back with Democrat Vincent Shaheen, who's running against Governor Nikki Haley, and Tom Irvin. We'll be right back.